All right, everyone. Good evening. On behalf of the Women on the Move Network, I would love to welcome all of you to our Women Empowerment Workshop for this month. My name is Sohaila Azizi. I'm one of the board members. Some of the other board members are present today, but I get to have the distinct pleasure of introducing today's speaker and presenter. Not only because he is my cousin, but also because he's one of the finest people that I've ever come to know. And not only is he professional and he shares his profession with everyone as a service, but he also works as if it's a principle of faith, as if it's worship. And these days, with all that's going on in the world, precious findings like someone like him would be an honor to introduce. So to me, the credentials, the things that you will learn about him will come next. But I wanted to present how I perceive my cousin as one of the finest individuals and how he shares his knowledge and how he cares about people whom he serves. So Hush Imani is an enrolled agent and he is holding representation rights with the IRS. And he'll probably explain that to us a little later. And he also does that in the states that have tax collecting function. And he'll probably tell us which states those are. And along his journey, he has moved from his first career to taxes. I remember him doing things about security and government and world, security issues. And he's very knowledgeable in the history of the world, the United States and the world, but he has landed with taxes, and he mainly works with individual clients and corporations of all income levels, but has been drawn to where the need is. And in audit representation, he's doing a great job. He does defense of those who have suffered abuses in the financial system. And he tends to be a continuing he feels that there is a continuing theme of abuse of individuals. But
Went over the
I'm sorry, can you mute, please? I'm muting you. Thank you. So along his journey, he has found that the abuse of individuals, but mostly women that he has come across, has become an important issue for him to take on. And he also has found that representation of minority groups within the women who are considered at times to be a minority still has been a mission or a goal for him to be helping the marginalized, the underserved population. So without further ado, I will let Hush Imani to present himself and what he will be talking to us about today. Here you go.
Thank you so much, Sohaila. So like Sohaila said, I'm an enrolled agent, which basically means that I've achieved the highest level of IRS status that there is. And that means that I can represent clients that aren't necessarily my clients, but who come to me, and I can represent them in front of tax court. I can appeal on their behalf. I can do basically almost everything an attorney can do, but strictly in the tax financial aspect and arena of the world. And what I tend to see most often, like Sohaila said, is the abused coming to me. And they tend to only be one gender. And it wasn't shocking at first, but I'll tell you a quick story. One year I had one client who was like that and who had significant signs of financial abuse. I helped her as best as I could. And the next year I had specifically exactly 17 clients who were in the exact same shoes. And I asked a coworker, I said, what happened? I had one and now I have 17 of these. And she said, Hush, you're not thinking like a woman. we have book club, we have wine club, we have divorce club, we have all these clubs. And this one woman has gone and spread the word that you have an empathetic side to you and you can help them. And now you've gone from 1 to 17. That's it. So as much as I found that shocking, I also didn't. And I'm going to get to it, but the financial world really sees the abused as two specific things in a bipolar kind of way. So there's a lot of systems and resources set up, but there's also a side of them which only sees the numbers. And they can't get past that a lot of times, which is unfortunate. And that's where my role comes in, because I kind of move into that role of building a firewall between the clients and their myriad forms and letters, and whatever I can do to block that and to put a hold on things and to get them going forward and dealing with their own humanistic side of things and let me deal with the numbers. That's the aim and the goal. So without further ado, I will begin the PowerPoint. And this is just a quick definition of what financial abuse is. And basically, it's involving or controlling the victim's ability to acquire, use, and maintain financial resources. And this dovetails significantly with every other form of abuse that we see. And usually the first thing we think of isn't finances. We think of physicality or verbal or emotional. But if you guys take nothing away from this, I've highlighted it in red. 99% of domestic violence cases involve and occur with financial abuse. They dovetail 99% of the time. If you take nothing away from this presentation, whenever you hear domestic violence, I want you to think financial abuse is stuck to that, because 99% of the time, unfortunately, it is. And the early signs of this, and it's possible to spot this early on because it's usually the first sign of abuse, any kind of abuse in general, is controlling or spending your money, which means trying to control your use or access to money, and it's money that you have earned or saved. Ruining your credit history. This is running up your limits and not paying the bills, or claiming that I've paid the bills and they really haven't. It's malicious, it's abuse. It dovetails with all these other signs. Feeling entitled to your money or assets. There's oftentimes demands that the abused person turns over paychecks, pay stubs, turns over passwords, credit cards. It goes on. And interfering with your finances. This is offering to help with your finances and your budget, trying to basically receive access to information someone wouldn't usually have, and saying, hey, I'm good at budgeting, let me take care of it, which tends to be a recurring theme, and there's other slides on that. But along with this, eventually it comes to threats of lying to officials that you've misused benefits like welfare, child support, these kinds of things. So that's the extreme end of it. But these are also some more signs. And a lot of people don't think of this specific thing, but adding their name to accounts or financial assets. A lot of times we think of abuse as the taking away of things. But oftentimes, as I've seen, the abuser puts your name on the asset and says, it's better financially, it's better for us. But what ends up happening, if worse comes to worse and there's a divorce and there's separation involved, the IRS will come after the person who owns the asset in their view. They can't see past context. They don't see anything except the name of the person on the multi-million-dollar business. That's it. And the letters will come to you, not the person who ran the day-to-day operations. a lot of times they'll ask you to prove what you spent your money on. They might demand receipts. They might demand a budget, some sort of balancing of the checkbook. I know a lot of people don't have checkbooks anymore, but it's still a solid example. And limits on what you can spend your money on. All of these things rack up to the most severe kind of financial abuse. And what I've seen a lot, especially in the tax world, is having you sign things that you have no idea what they are, or it's a form you're completely unfamiliar with. And a lot of times this can bite you later on. And this happens a lot. I see this almost every tax season, several times. Another big one is one person completes a joint tax return and says, just sign it. You hate doing this anyway. I've done it right. Trust me. And then 5 years down the line, not so much. Spotting the signs early. Unfortunately, financial abuse is going to be the first and recurring theme that you see when you're in a dating partner or a spousal relationship. So before the hitting, before the name calling, before the emotional abuse, you will see financial abuse. Because again, 99% of the time, you can just imagine that these things dovetail together perfectly. And there's two main avenues for this, and the future slides will address this. The first is interfering with your job or ability to earn income. And the second is the controlling of your shared assets and resources. So I've split these two up in the future slides. And what I've done is kind of a what you hear versus the reality of it. And the first one is based on interfering with your job and your income potential. So I like to call this drilling down. When you're drilling down, when you have a spouse, when you're just starting to date, when you're just seeing these signs show up, you might hear something, but the reality is something completely different. So the first one is a pressuring of you to quit your job. And what you might hear is the kids really need you at home, something along those lines. Whereas it's not about that. The second one is telling you where and when you can work and how you can work. And again, that's not what you'll hear. What you'll hear is something similar to, you don't want to work for minimum wage, do you? Something like that. Something that seems harmless, very easy to hear, but again, this all racks up to the same feelings of fear and isolation and control that all abuse leads to. Sabotaging and harassing you at work and interfering with your responsibilities. This can come in the means of, I just stopped by to bring you flowers, but it's bringing you flowers every day and interfering. Or I couldn't reach you, I was worried, I panicked, so I called your boss to check on you. And this can be something that happens systemically over and over and over. Again, what you're hearing, the first one, it's flowers. Flowers are lovely, everyone loves flowers, but it's the sabotage and the harassment and the constant haranguing of your ability to earn. That's what it comes down to. And in extreme situations, it's preventing you from working by doing things like sabotaging your vehicle, hiding your keys, even unhooking your car battery, things like that. And what you'll hear will be, oh, honey, you lost your keys again, or the car needs to go to the mechanic again, something like that, where it doesn't sound too malicious, and it might even be an offer for them to take it to the mechanic, but in reality, there's nothing wrong, and it all leads back to interference. And this is the second avenue of the what you hear versus reality, the controlling of shared assets. So again, what you'll hear is, if you keep spending this way, I'll need to see receipts, ha, ha, ha. But essentially what's happening, it's a criticizing of your financial decisions. And The do as I say, not as I do is simply what you're hearing is the reality of a double standard regarding spending. They might spend crazy and there's no checks and balances on them, but the control that they'll put on you to prove your spending, to see what's going on, to interfere and control your shared assets is the part that's the financial abuse. All of these individual things, I'll go through them all, but I'll try and make it quick. So limiting your access to money, this might come in the form of, I'm better at investing, so I sold that stock that we bought together and we owned together and was a shared asset. So again, it might seem harmless, but when you look at all of these things together and you say the words and hear the words differently, you'll see that reality is telling you something completely different. And I'll just go through these last ones really quickly. Controlling the purse strings, becoming enraged over money, leading to name calling and physical violence, and evading or refusing to pay child support and dragging out divorce proceedings to cripple you. Basically, this is a form of continued financial abuse that sometimes it begins after separation, sometimes it continues after separation. So when it comes to the impact of these things, I've kind of kept it brief because I want to talk more about the resources and the systems that are out there that can benefit you in scenarios where financial abuse happens, has happened, and the forms and resources that are available. So when it comes to the impact of these things, I've kind of kept that part brief. So again, like all abuse, every single form of abuse, one of the root outcomes is isolation. They will look for low-hanging fruit. They will look for someone already isolated, and they will look to isolate you more. This is intrinsic to every kind of abuse. You name it, it exists. So isolation is the easiest way for someone to pick you out, and if not that, to make you isolate. And a creation or furtherance of a lack of confidence. If you already have that, then unfortunately you're low-hanging fruit. And if you don't have that, the abuser will try and get you to a point where you lack enough confidence that you will basically go with the abuser's version of things. And again, a feeling of being trapped, which is the main reason why those who've been abused return to the abuser when it comes to financial abuse. So what I see in my practice a lot is someone comes to me and it's their first year having a job and they haven't paid into Social Security tax. They haven't paid into unemployment insurance. So according to the IRS and the state, they really have no history. They have no ability to pull on these things when they need it. And again, money is one of the biggest reasons for divorce and one of the biggest reasons why abused people go back to their abusers. Because when you don't have these things to rest on, you don't have a pension, you don't have Social Security. These are all the legs of the bar stool of retirement that was set up in the 60s. So when you don't have any of those options, you go back to the abuser because there's no other option. I can't imagine, and I can see it in someone who's abused, that if you think about tomorrow from what you have today financially, you have to think of where am I going to live? Where am I going to sleep? Where am I going to eat? How am I going to eat? How am I going to get there? And when you think of the social resources that we have in this country, these things take months. You can't be homeless and not eat and not have water, all of these basic resources for months until your forms are in and processed. So that feeling of being trapped works very well, unfortunately, with finances because finances are instant. And I wrote this in big font here. The impact of financial abuse cannot be understated. Because, like I said, the financial world is bipolar. One version of them sees you as numbers. That's it. That is it. There's no common sense there. And the other version has systems and resources set up specifically for situations like this. So I can't emphasize enough how bipolar this world is, because what they don't see is everything else in context. And they look at things in a vacuum. And if all you have is a spotty employment record and a bad credit history, they're not going to look at that too fondly. In fact, on scenario 4, which is coming up soon, I was calling the state on behalf of a client. And after I explained all the different forms of abuse, because of course, 99% of that dovetailed with the other abuse that was happening to this person, they literally said, that's a great sob story, but we're going to need more than that. We're going to need last 3 months of pay stubs. And I said, stop. There are no pay stubs. There was no permission to leave the house to go out to work, let alone to have pay stubs. I can only prove this by court documents, and that's not going to be instant. So again, the first thing that this woman who I was talking to at the state saw was, that's a great sob story. Literally, that's what she said to me. And that gets me every time. And when somebody gets me like that, I just want to fight. And I told this person, I'm doing this for free. I don't care. This is a fight that I know I can win. This is a fight I'm going to take all the way if I have to. But lo and behold, I end up doing that a lot because my emotions get me. And I tell people, I'm doing this for free. I don't care. You're going to see results. So what I'm going to display next are real life scenarios that I've seen in my practice and I fought in my practice. And I've gotten permission from all of these people who I'm sharing the scenarios with. And I fought and defended these successfully. And in fact, I fought 3 of those cases just this year with 3 successes. The 4th one, I don't know if it will win, but even if it doesn't, this last year, I've gone 3 out of 4 in audit defense. And these cases kind of range from like simple pettiness between a divorced couple to situations of extreme malice and abuse that does continue. And that's why I emphasize sometimes abuse starts after separation, sometimes it continues after separation. So again, these cases kind of range back and forth, but 1 will be the easiest for me to fix, and 4 will be the granddaddy of them all, which I'm still fighting. And that's the one that said, that's a great sob story. So when we get to scenario number 4, keep in mind that the state of California officially told me that's a great sob story. So hold your breath, because scenario number 4 is every possible thing that could have gone wrong has gone wrong. Okay, so scenario number 1. The victim was denied any tax refunds coming to them. And again, this made me scratch my head. And the IRS and practically every state that this person had to deal with was taking their refund money annually. When I called them, they don't really explain why, how much they took, why they took it. And that's called a refund offset. And the explanation is something was wrong. We were owed the money. We took the money. End of story. Done. So the abuser in this case purposely neglected to mention that they had a default on their student loans. And they were looking to get it cleared sooner rather than later. And what they were doing was they knew that the entire tax refund was going to be scooped up instantly. Because when it comes to the IRS and any of the 50 states, the only thing they communicate well at is owed money. So that's the only time they communicate, whether it's parking tickets, whether it's child support, anything in default. That's when they really communicate well. Their systems are made, set up for this. So there was a student default, and the abuser knew this, didn't share it with the person he was joint filing with. And what he wanted to do basically was get this, like an open bar tab, cleared as soon as possible. But the person that came to me said, I haven't gotten a tax refund in 5 years, and I have several kids. And I looked at her tax returns, and there were refunds on all of them, but nothing was being given out by the state or the IRS. So my solution to this is actually quite simple. There's 2 different versions, and I have separate slides for this, but for now, basically, if there's something called injured spouse allocation, and there's something called innocent spouse relief. So a case like this is what we call injured spouse relief. So what happens here is they allocate the spouse's money on one side and the spouse's money on the other side. Any refund that gets taken will only get taken based on the numbers on the abuser's side in this case, and that gets the refund offset. But the other side that had no idea and is just suffering the consequences of this, all I need to do is e-file that form with the tax return, and they'll allocate 2 separate lines of income, show 2 separate refunds, and this person ended up getting refunds going back 3 years because that's the maximum. So not too difficult a situation, but again, if I hadn't looked into it, and if the abuser didn't feel like I was too concerned about this, it probably would have went on until the student debt was cleared. But luckily, someone asked questions and I stepped in. Okay, scenario number 2. The victim and the spouse were receiving an audit claiming that they had more income than claimed and ineligible deductions because of that income. So not only did this increase the tax due, but time had gone by. So it added penalties. There was accruing interest that happens every single day at specific interest rate that's set by the IRS. And in this case, the abuser just cooked the books. And he, again, like I was talking about earlier, he got the spouse to sign the return. The spouse had no interest. No one has interest in taxes, let's be honest. And after that was all turned in, the IRS came back and said, we have reports of a lot more income. Why are you underclaiming your income? When I got all the documents and I looked at it, the tax returns looked fine. But then I got the IRS's version of the tax return. That didn't look fine. So this fell under, again, signing of forms without input or signing of forms that you don't know what they are. That's always a bad thing. And that was under the category of the controlling of shared assets. And again, this is something I see several times a year, and I wish I didn't. But the solution to this is actually fairly simple. This is a case of what we call innocent spouse relief. And there's innocent and there's injured. A lot of people get those mixed up. But innocent means that one of the people in the marriage had no idea. They were innocent of knowing of any income. So let's say someone has gambling income that they hide in the attic, or recognized income or unrecognized income, it doesn't matter. The IRS wants to tax that. And if the IRS gets reported of that income by an employer, then there's no hiding it. And again, cooking the books didn't work for the abuser in this case, because I filed the innocent spouse relief on this, and they allocated things separately. They forgave the spouse in this case. They penalized the abuser in this case. He got the penalties, he got the interest, he got everything. The spouse in this case didn't have to deal with letters, forms, nothing. I filed a simple form, and this was pretty much a done deal. And again, I see this way more times than I wish I had to, but I just wanted to put it out there that these are two things that are out there. There are future slides that go delve into this a little bit more, but innocent spouse relief and an injured spouse allocation are two of your best friends. And the IRS provides these things, the state does not. I haven't dealt with any state of all the 50 states that have a separate version of these similar things. But what I found out recently is that the state of California at least has a department for each of these things, which they don't tell us about. There's no specific forms for, but if you get their number, they will do the same thing that the IRS does. They will conform to IRS law for these state situations. So even if it comes down to a state situation, I know I can call on them to give me an injured spouse relief or give me an innocent spouse relief. So these are things that exist. The state doesn't like to talk about them too much, but there are ways to go back and fix these things. It's never too late in the tax world. All right, so this isn't necessarily full-on abuse, but again, it's something I see several times a year, and I wanted to kind of elaborate on this because it's something that happens all the time, and it makes it very difficult for the abused person in this case, or I can't really call them abused, but I'll just go through it. How about that? So one partner raises the children all her life, and the other partner is the sole breadwinner and the earner in the family. So what this does is it leaves the person who raises the children with no Social Security taxes paid, no unemployment insurance paid, which kind of leaves them poorly set up for retirement. Because like I mentioned, these are two of the legs of the famous bar stool that was set up in the 60s. Social Security, you can depend on unemployment. You'll likely have a pension that far back. They're not handed out these days anymore. But the IRS and every single tax collecting state, which means about 40. There's about 38 to 40 tax collecting states. Some states don't have tax. So if you look at that, the IRS and all tax collecting states will see this person starting fresh, but they will also provide no recourse for this. So it's almost as if you're dealing with a child in this way, because they can't depend on Social Security for retirement. They can't lean on unemployment when they need it before retirement. There's no employment history, which means there's likely no credit history. So due to all of these things, this person is not set up well for retirement. But again, even before retirement, they're not set up well for leaning on things that people who work lean on. And this is something I see a lot, but there's nothing I can really do about it, and there's nothing the client can really do about it. They raise children. That was the scenario. So I just wanted to kind of lay this out, whereas usually you don't really think about these things, but you can see clearly that if you can't lean on unemployment, you can't lean on Social Security, you don't have a pension because you've never worked. Moms are the hardest working people I see. You don't really have any recourse to set yourself up for retirement unless you're doing your due diligence and setting up an IRA and an individual retirement account, something like that. You don't really have much savings usually. So again, every case varies from person to person, but this is something I see all the time. And it's not necessarily abuse at all. It's just the reality of how our systems are set up. So when it comes to the financial world, child rearing isn't seen as a great financial boon. It just isn't. And it's mainly due to the lack of how we treat moms, how we show our appreciation to them, but also when it comes to the financial world, we don't have certain things set up. So unless you go all out and you've set up an LLC, something like that, and you're working the system, like certain people know how to work it, you're not well set up for the gap between retirement after you've raised your kids, and you're not set up for retirement. So I just wanted to set up this scenario, and you probably know about 20 people like this. I know a lot of people like this. It's not abuse, but it is a difficult situation if things go sour. So this is scenario 4. This is probably the hardest case I've ever worked on, and it's not done yet. And I don't foresee it to be done for a while. So if you recall, this is the one where actually it was the state of Arizona told me that's a great sob story. So keep that in mind when I go through the bullet points here. So keep in mind how they treat these kinds of situations if there's no empathy, because all it is a lack of empathy. That's it. It could change like that, but it doesn't. There's no incentive. So in this case, the client was physically not allowed to work. She was told, you have to raise the children. You cannot leave the house unless you're taking the kids to school and back. That's it. So they have little Social Security taxes paid because of that. No unemployment insurance paid, so she can't claim on it. And the partner didn't file taxes for several years. And the abused person didn't have any knowledge of this at all. So the abuser actually brought forms to the victim and said, sign these, I'm putting the business in your name, it'll be better for us. And even though the victim never worked a single day in this business, they were seen as the owner of this business and still are to this day. And the divorce isn't yet finalized, but the house is going to be given to the victim. And due to the failure to file her tax returns and the failure to pay those tax returns, there's a tax lien by the IRS and there's a tax lien by the state on the house that was given to the abused victim. And there's a niche law for Arizona where if the tax lien is over $150,000, which in this case it is, it's a good sized house, then at any time, this is a random thing as well, at any time they can suspend the driver's license and any occupational licenses. So just imagine that for a second. You can be pulled over at any time, and if the state has informed that like they're very good at doing, then the police officer can cite you for driving without a license or driving with a suspended license. So now, even after all of these things are done and the abuser is gone, he left with all of the assets of the business, all of the books of the business, all of the bookkeeping, everything. He's gone. Now she looks like the owner of a multi-million-dollar business. And I told the state this. I explained in detail what was going on. And now they're looking for what were the steps she took to separate herself from being the owner of this business. And I told them she couldn't leave the house in 2023. How do you expect her to stand up to the abuser and say, I want to separate myself from being the owner of this business? How do you think that's going to go? Because again, financial abuse is happening, physical abuse is happening, emotional abuse is happening. You name the kind of abuse, it's happening to this person. And if any of you have a solution to this, I would love to lend an ear. I would love a solution, a quick, easy solution or a long solution to this. But this is something I've been working on since this summer. And I don't foresee it ending until possibly end of 2020. This is the most difficult case I've ever come across, with the most lack of empathy by a state and the most lack of empathy by the IRS I have ever seen. And it gets me. I'm doing this for free, and I cannot wait until this is over because she still has the signs of abuse. She still is in fear. She's in isolation. She says sorry too much. She is jumpy. And I talk to her a lot on the phone. And she says, I'm still suffering through this and I have anxiety and I can barely work. I need to reduce my hours of work. And I tell her, you need to show some last pay stubs, unfortunately, so that we can get you some kind of hardship out of this. Because otherwise, the IRS is going to say, we don't know what to do. Like, she looks like she's the owner of a multi-million-dollar business. She hasn't filed taxes in 5 to 7 years. She owes significant amounts and she owes penalties, she owes interest. Prove to us that this is not the case. And it's very hard to do. I can tell them a great sob story. They're right. That I can do. I can give them court documents. I can try and prove that she's gone in front of a judge and declared the abuse, and it's been filed and stamped by a clerk, and it's official, and there's not much more I can do. If they're not going to accept it, I don't know what I can do. But what I've done so far for this person is I called the IRS and I said, I want a 9-week action hold. A 9-week action hold means for 9 straight weeks, they can't send her a letter, they can't send her a form, they can't send her a greeting card, nothing. So I have 9 weeks to work on getting in touch with her attorneys, getting them to send out the right court documents to the state, getting those myself possibly, if they'll let me, and sending it to the specific case manager at the state. So this is the hardest thing I've worked on. I just wanted you to get a sense of how stuck you can be. And this doesn't even deal with the person who's been abused, putting time and distance between the abuse and her suffering. Her emotional suffering is completely beyond the scope of anything I can do. All I can do is fix her financial life, maybe. Beyond that, I've just told her time and distance, time and distance, time and distance. That's the only thing that's going to fix this. Time, time, distance, distance. He's a long lost thought. Give it time, give it distance. It will get better. All right, so like I was saying, there's 2 sides to the financial world, and what the IRS and every state that collects tax sees with financial abuse. There's the humanistic side, because they have things like innocent spouse, injured spouse. They have these departments. They don't like to talk about them too much, but when it comes to the IRS, there's specific forms, and they make it very clear that, hey, we have these systems set up for these specific situations. So all I need to do in these cases is e-file a form that basically explains what's going on, and done deal. But again, when it comes to the states, that's who I have the most trouble with. The IRS, surprisingly, they're very nice people. They're kind, they're empathetic every time I call, and they will deal with these things. They look at context. The states do not. They strictly look at numbers and they tell me things like, that's a great sob story, which infuriates me. So again, I've just left this note here. If you think someone in your life is financially abusive, or you know someone in these circumstances, psychology and studies tell us these things do not get better with time. These things usually escalate and move to other, sometimes new forms of abuse. So again, if it's just financial abuse you're seeing now, it can lead to emotional abuse, name calling, physical abuse, the thing that we think of the most, domestic abuse that we see in movies and in TV all the time. And we think this can't still be happening. It's still happening, folks. We do harassment trainings that still involve people making fun of pregnant women at work. This is a billion-dollar corporation that still has to deal with people making fun of people of other genders, of other religions. This is the training we have to take every year at a billion-dollar corporation because we're in 2024 and we still can't get it right, folks. Just can't get it right. Okay, so this is my resource page. You may be familiar, but I thought it can never hurt to throw these things in there another time. So the number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233, or you can text Love Is to 22522. There is the crisis text line, and you can text them at 741-741, and that's a free 24/7 text line, which connects you with a trained crisis counselor. And this isn't strictly for veterans, but there is the Veterans Crisis Line, which is 1-800-273-TALK. And you can also text them at 838-255. And these responders are specially trained for people who've been in the military or in some branch of the service. But this service is also available to friends, family, and loved ones of those people as well. And one thing I want to emphasize on is a lot of times when we think financial abuse, we think it's the man doing it to a woman. Sometimes it can be the woman doing it to a man. But a lot of times we don't think about elder abuse in that way, because if there's elder abuse, there's oftentimes elder financial abuse. And a lot of times the fiduciary institutions and the people who are in charge of our money and our assets that we think have fiduciary duty to take care of these things and not be in a situation to take advantage, they will also be the financial institutions who take advantage of it. So I just wanted to emphasize on that because it's not strictly always an individual to an individual. It can be trust related, estate related. Again, when it comes to money, there is no ends to the lengths that people go to. And fiduciary institutions and people who have a fiduciary duty will sometimes fall into that trap as well, even if it's putting their career at risk. I have seen things. All right, so what can you do in terms of best practices to protect yourself or put yourself in a better situation going forward? So again, protect your personal information. I just heard from my boss's boss today that he has a master written down list of all his passwords. And the minute he said that, all 20 of us on the Zoom call just completely, we could not believe it. He's writing down his passwords on paper, all of them. Every single password this man has. From a multi-billion-dollar corporation, he's writing down on a piece of paper. So protect your personal information. That's first and foremost. If possible and safe in your situation, contact any banks and credit unions that you have an account with and change your PIN or access code. But only when it's possible and only when it's safe. Access your credit report. A free credit report can be accessed from the website, and it's annualcreditreport.com. And having access to this credit report, sometimes it's a double-edged sword because they can be hard to read, but there's a lot of companies like Credit Karma who do a more simplified form of this, and you can basically read through it in human language, and it can help. It can set you up for knowing about if you have a line of credit out that you don't know about, whether it's the person who you're being abused by or not. It's still good to know. Knowledge is power. And contact the IRS. With the IRS, they've made it more easy than ever. They have an app set up even, so you can create an account with the IRS, and that'll grant you access to something called wage and income transcripts. Basically what this is every employer that you work for the year, they have to report to the IRS, they have to report to the state how much they paid you and what their identification numbers are. So you have a copy of your W-2s or 1099s, whatever the case may be, and a copy goes out to the IRS, goes out to the state, goes out to what ends up on your wage and income transfer. And the states provide this service as well. Again, they're not as friendly, they're not as nice, they're not as forthcoming, but it is a quite easy step to take. And prepare for the future. If it's currently unsafe to leave your situation, like it can be a lot of times, open a bank account and deposit any cash possible. But remember to opt for no bank statements to be sent to your mailing address, because again, sometimes the person who lives with you is the abuser in this case, and you don't want to make a situation that's just financial abuse to become unsafe, physical, and also financial abuse. Again, these are two of the things that we talked about. I just did a full slide so that you can see exactly what the definitions are. So there's innocent spouse relief, and innocent spouse relief is if there's a controlling partner that substantially understated income or overstated credits, which both they're not going to look fondly on, the non-controlling partner has options. So again, I just fill out that form and e-file it, and the IRS knows exactly what it is, what to do with it, and they allocate correctly. And then the IRS also provides injured spouse relief. So that states that if a partner is aware that a refund will be confiscated, even if it's not abuse, even if a husband comes into a new marriage with child support that's not been paid, and he shares that with the wife, they know ahead of time. Again, all I do is I fill out the injured spouse relief form, and everything works out the way it should. So again, when it comes to communication, child support, past student debt that's in default, parking tickets, anything that's due to the state or the IRS, they're great at communicating. So again, in this case, the injured partner can separate their income and figure out their refund on that form. So the way I remember this, when I first had to remember it, was an innocent spouse means I didn't know. I didn't know that my husband was making 15 grand in gambling income and putting it under a mattress. Injured spouse means I was injured by it. I didn't know until I knew. And now this is injuring my ability to get my legitimate tax. So that's my quick verbiage to remember that. And again, if you feel like a fully confidential consultation for whatever circumstances you have going on would be helpful, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm just a phone call away. You can call me, you can text me, and my email is on the slide as well. And that is exactly 1 hour.
Thank you so much, Hush Imani. I call him Hush due to the relationship. However, you've ended right on time, left us a little bit of time for questions. Please. There's some thank you notes coming out from Yanette, and thank you for sending that in. Please speak up if you want to open up your microphone one at a time and ask questions. I can stay for another 10 minutes and conduct the meeting, but we would like to close by 6:15 at the
Can we
latest.
just speak up? Can I just speak up, or do I have to get in line?
No, you're the first person and your mic is the only one open, so please.
I was just wondering, at one point, you had written up there that so there was no unemployment insurance taken out. How does that happen?
Yeah, so unemployment insurance gets paid when you have a job that you earn money from. Basically, they take, I think, 1% of that. That's usually state disability insurance, but there's a certain percentage threshold that they take off of every paycheck that you pay into as an individual. So a lot of people have the fear of, oh, if I claim unemployment, there'll be none left for me later on, or I'll have to pay it back at some time, but that's just not the case. Unemployment is money that you've put into the system. And when you claim unemployment, you're just claiming that money back.
So it's insurance.
Yeah, it's an insurance against time when times are kind of rough. And it happens automatically.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at my paycheck stub for 28 years, I could see it, but I can imagine looking at your stub and not seeing that it wasn't coming out.
Yeah, so if you have paycheck stubs, it's going to be there.
Yeah. Are you saying that IRS can intercede and get that money before you get it if you've applied for unemployment?
No, they don't need to intercede. So basically, when you get your, so all of the pay stubs add up, and that's when you get like a W-2. So on that W-2, it'll have a certain amount for unemployment, which is taken from the total of all of your pay stubs for the past year. So the IRS is aware of that. And when you work a job, you don't even have to say, I want to pay more into it, I want to pay less into it, or I want to pay it at all. It's just an automatic system that automatically does the thing it does on its pay stub. But you don't need to intercede, or all you need to do is apply for unemployment to file a claim with EDD, which is California's version, is where you apply. It's EDD, like David. And once you apply there, they'll usually accept your claim depending on a few things. You have to tell them if you're still working, why you're still not working, or working, how many hours you work. So after that initial application, then you will get unemployment sent to you, which is also taxable. But
My question about intercession was by IRS having their hands on those funds. I just want to see the relationship of those funds to what IRS can do to those funds with your knowledge or without your knowledge.
yeah, so these funds go straight to the state. There's no IRS involvement.
Okay.
It goes straight to the state. And then if you ever claim it, the state will pay it to you. But basically, it's something that's automatic that you pay into as an employee. And it goes straight to the state. It's a kind of like a trust fund.
And
Until
if this, and if you owe the state based on any of these situations, can the state intercede and take that money?
No, that's usually,
That was asked.
I've never seen that happen. They'll dip into every other thing you have going on. They'll look at even your unclaimed property. That there's a website, I think it's called Unclaimed Property, which you put your name into, and it tells you if the state owes you any money that you didn't know about. So they'll take future tax refunds, they'll do that kind of thing, but they'll never take your unemployment insurance.
Thank you. That's the only thing that I was confused that I thought I might have heard you say. Thank you.
Thanks, Hoosh, for all the information. That's wow. Thank you for all of that. I think you would be wonderful to go and speak at women's shelters. I think,
I would love that.
yeah, that would be wonderful for them.
Well, I'd like to see more survival classes at the high school level to include,
That's a good idea to speak to. Yeah.
because these poor kids, I have a 20-year-old in the house, and I'm going, oh, well, anyway,
We
Yeah.
can incorporate that into Hoosh has been interested in doing financial literacy as part of the Girls Empowerment
Yeah.
program. So as we are rewriting some of the curricula, it would be helpful to maybe have a session just dedicated to all the potential, future financial abuses that they could be facing. So thank you, Hoosh. That was
Yeah.
truly informative and informational and helpful. And I'm hoping that more people who would just visit the website and get the full scoop on what you had given us. Are there any other questions? I know friends have been sending thank yous through the chat.
You sound like you're in a hurry to get going, and I know we have something else after this, but I just found myself listening and putting myself in different scenarios in my life and being suspicious of some of that. Did I ever come across that? You know, just checking myself out in my life and in my life's experiences. And there were times when it could have went that way, but I took a hold and nobody was going to get past it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because
Hard.
sometimes we don't really think about these things until we think about them. And when you're looking at real life scenarios, I know that I did that too, looking through the 4 scenarios. I'm like, did that ever happen to me? Did that happen to me? No, I think, no, I'm okay. So that's why I added the real life scenarios, because these are things I see all the time. The 4th case, no, it's kind of rare, but the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd, I see those things probably a good dozen times every year. And if I can catch it early enough, I can e-file the form and pull some of that money back. But after 3 years, you have to file, of course. You can only get a refund back if it's the 3-year window. Anything past that, you have to file a tax return. You can possibly owe, but even if you have a refund on 4 years ago, that's lost. It's gone.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is certainly not something that would be all wrapped up in 1 hour. We appreciate that you squeezed all of that into the hour that we had, but we definitely will have session 2 to just continue the conversation. It was very helpful. Hope that everyone else enjoyed it as much as
Yes.
did. Yes, thank you, Hoosh. Please come back. As
I'd love to do,
again,
like, a little quick workshop of like basically how the tax flow works, and get a little bit in depth and drill down with that. I know it's kind of not very interesting, but I just want to do like the basics of a tax return, like the flow of it.
I
Actually,
think
made
that I
it-
would, yeah, I think that would be good.
And maybe get some youth that you know interested enough to listen. Maybe somebody doing this for the first time, you know, doing their taxes for the first time.
we may edit the part that you do all of these for free, because then you will just be having to open your charitable institution to just be able to do this. Really, if there are some funding available someplace, so for you to be helping the shelters, to be helping people in need, that would be a great idea for some people who can write up for grants for those purposes. So
Mhm.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Yes, Edie, we're not rushed, but we do have to respect everyone's time when we announce certain things to be ending at a certain time. So thank you all for participating. And Yanette said thank you before she left. So
Right.
on her behalf and on behalf of the women and the Move Network, we thank you again, and we really appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Bye.
So much, everyone.
See you along the way.
Yes.
Bye.
You as early as tonight, possibly.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi,
Bye.
Melanie. It was good seeing you. We didn't greet you to the meeting, but it was good seeing you.
I'm sorry I came late. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. I had to mute you at some point, but I apologize. So I have to stop the recording. Stop recording. All right.